Here you
So,
go.
thank you. You want me to clip it or hold it?
It doesn't matter. I like holding it
Okay, I'll
because
do the
sometimes I
same.
think my hair does it, but
I don't
you
have
won't
that
have
issue.
that issue.
I'm ready for a haircut. I was like,
Well, it's so nice to meet you.
yeah, very
Eliza
nice
Orleans.
to meet you. Yes, very nice to meet you.
So I've been a career public defender in Manhattan for 15 years.
Awesome.
I just want to start with kind of the obvious, which is we saw an assassination of a person who is actively political online, and though they're not an elected official, you think that this must raise concerns for you. And I think everybody probably already knows, but that you were one of the 70 people listed on the list with Melissa Hortman. And so, what are your big concerns about all of this right now? How are you feeling? Are you okay?
No one should ever have to be afraid of just expressing their political views, and that there could be any kind of violence or threat to them or their families. And we saw what happened in Minnesota that weekend. And that first day they only had 13 names, and I was at the state Democratic convention, and they took those people aside to give them a briefing. Didn't think much of it. The next morning we get the call, oh yeah, you're also on the list. And that was all the information we had. And then what happened this week, it's not the way in a civilized society you deal with political discourse. You can absolutely disagree. I completely disagree with almost everything Charlie Kirk could possibly have been saying, but that's no excuse for political violence. In fact, it makes us less of a democracy when we actually have those things happen. And I think the good news is almost every Democrat I heard, at least major Democrat, was saying, this is awful and we can't have this kind of violence. But I watched Republican reps like Derek Van Orden from Wisconsin, or Nancy Mace from Mars, or wherever she's from, saying things that were, really increasing the temperature and increasing the environment that causes this violence. So I think we're trying to have everyone calm down, but the president certainly didn't do any good when he spoke nationally and kind of fanned some of those flames.
Couldn't agree more. And speaking of calling out Republicans or members of this administration, I think you were very vocal calling out Stephen Miller when he made those statements about our Democratic nominee for mayor here in New York City. I know that the folks in New York care very much about this mayoral election. Can you talk about, you've obviously spoken up in favor of Zohran Mamdani.
Yeah.
I'm also a big supporter of his and look forward to electing him as our next mayor. And I was just wondering what you think both about what the Republicans are saying about him, but also about the fact that some of the elected New York Democrats we have not, in fact, endorsed him yet.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the good news is I think the people of New York know where they're at, and they're going to elect him to be the next mayor. And that's more important probably than any individual. But having said that, he's the Democratic nominee. It should be a no-brainer that you're supporting the Democratic nominee in a time like this. But the comments by Stephen Miller were just part of, again, this fanning of these hatred flames that can cause the problems that we've been seeing. So I was glad to take him on, took a little heat for it, but taking on Stephen Miller is always a badge of honor in my opinion. So that's important, but I'm looking forward to Mamdani being elected mayor, and I'm quite sure by looking at all the polls that that's what's going to happen.
I think so too, but we can't take our foot off the gas because absolutely. I think that it's quite clear that the Trump administration doesn't want to see him as mayor. They will stop at nothing to try to get him elected. They offered Adams a job in the administration to try to get him out of the race. This is something that I think as New Yorkers we constantly have to worry about. Our city is under attack, and as you're here in our beautiful city, you can see how safe it is, and it's not in need of the National Guard.
Well, and the people I've talked to who live here, who I know who aren't even very political, are all saying the same thing. They get that Mamdani's the leading candidate. They want to see him elected, but some of the inner battles that perhaps people on the inside have are kind of irrelevant to the real world. And the good news is the real world is the real world.
Exactly. I think the online discourse sometimes can bleed into what we see. And we always used to say before it got taken over that Twitter is not real life.
Yeah, exactly.
Now it's no longer Twitter, but that's a whole separate issue. One of the other things I thought I wanted to talk to you about. So I'm a career union member. Public defenders, we are unionized, and funny enough, we fall under the umbrella of UAW. I am a career card-carrying union member of the United Auto Workers. Nice. But I know that you are also very involved in the labor movement, and I was wondering if you could talk about how important labor is, how important unions are, and why we have to stand up for working folks who are union members.
Yeah, so I'm one of the founders of the Labor Caucus in Congress. I spent over 3 decades as a member of Painters and Allied Trades. I had a specialty printing business, and as the owner, I was also the person doing things when I first opened. So I've been a member of the union the entire time and just recently sold that business. Look, you get better trained workers when they're working through a union. You get higher pay and better benefits for people. You have safer working conditions for people. But that's a win-win for employers as well as the workers. If I have people who can support their family and come to work and be productive and help me make money, that's good for the employer. And if the employee is treated well and knows that at the end of the day they're going to get home because the conditions are safe and they have good benefits for their family, that's good for them. And that's the way it should be across the board. So unions really are the way to have a voice in your workplace. Without that, we see too many times people don't have those rights. And unfortunately, in the Trump administration, we're seeing a defunding and a dismantling of some of those protections through things like the National Labor Relations Board and other things that protect workers.
Absolutely. It's very upsetting to see. And I think that's why all these New Yorkers are out in the street. On May Day, we were all out. On so many other days, especially union members are really on the front lines standing up against this administration in so many ways. I think one of the other things that I've been really impressed by is your calling out of the HHS Secretary, RFK Jr. Truly the least qualified person for a position. I can't even fathom that is the person who's making these critical decisions that's impacting the lives of so many Americans. Yesterday being 9/11 here in New York City, the 24th anniversary, one of the horrific things they did was really cut the World Trade Center Health Center. And so many 9/11 survivors and first responders, heroes who ran towards danger rather than away from it and saved lives, who are now dealing with cancers and who are seeing their ability to get healthcare defunded, seeing staffers fired, having wait times of 6 or 8 months. So can you speak about the other things, the broader impacts of what RFK Jr. is doing?
Yeah, so I mean, the term I usually use about RFK is just, he's strange, right? It's a very strange leadership. He is a little bit like a broken clock. He's right on a couple things that are pretty important. I think having an emphasis on more natural foods and getting rid of some of the chemicals and the color additives are good. But you have to also fund health infrastructure, and you have to recommend things like vaccines that have helped us, as a society. And, when I questioned him about that, I thought I was giving him a softball and said, would you vaccinate your kids? Because I knew he had. And then he gave the very confusing answer that he did that day. The really sad part is we did the appropriations markup of the Health and Human Services budget on Monday of this week, and big cuts to the agency. But 25% of those cuts was just for HIV and AIDS. They completely zeroed out all preventive funds on HIV and AIDS. And I asked, why this virus? And part of it is we're seeing this really anti-LGBTQ behavior coming out of the MAGA folks. It started out with, who's using what bathroom and can trans girls play in sports, and it went to you can't have pride flags in federal facilities. And last week, Rand Paul actually said about an HHS facility who left the CDC because of RFK Jr., that he never should have had a government job anyway because of his lifestyle.
Oh my God.
This is like 1950s language coming back. Seriously. So RFK has been anything but a competent secretary, but it's also all these other things that are happening that we have to be really, I think, worried about and watching closely.
Absolutely. I mean, there are just so many horrific things that are happening, and he has just been a disaster in so many ways. I mean, like, make measles great again, right?
Yeah, I know.
What are we doing?
I thought polio. I asked him about the polio vaccine, and he couldn't give an affirmative answer.
I mean, my mom talks about when she was a little girl, remembering how scared people were and the polio pools and all the things that people went through in that day and age, and she cannot believe what is happening. I mean, it's just truly devastating in so many ways.
For Donald Trump, he just wants to keep that part of the support base of MAGA, the Maha base, and he'll allow RFK Jr. to do whatever. And, it's been strange.
Yeah, and the HIV cuts are particularly devastating. I had friends, a dear friend, Javi Munoz, he was
in my office, just last week.
He's a very good friend, and he was lobbying in DC, I know, speaking out against these cuts. And the RFK, the other cuts to LGBTQIA stuff, like the suicide prevention hotline. I mean, what do you think what's the mentality behind that? Like, why? It's just the cruelty for cruelty's sake.
Exactly. And part of it is they all want to one up each other and going a little farther. And that's why, it didn't get a whole lot of attention. But when Rand Paul said that you shouldn't work for the government because of your lifestyle, Like that was the culmination of a lot of these things kind of coming together. So the Equality Caucus is trying to deal with some of this. This week we had at least a half a dozen amendments affecting the community on the National Defense Authorization. Again, why women in sports would be part of the National Defense Authorization doesn't make any sense, but it's just where they all try to one up each other and get a little more pleasure from the cult leader Donald Trump.
It's truly despicable. Listen, this is obviously really dark times. This is stuff people are feeling depressed and hopeless, and I always try to tell people hope is a discipline. You have to actively search for it. You have to wake up every day and take small actions and do things within your community and call your representative and make it feel like you're making a difference. What would you say is the most impactful thing people can do?
I'll tell you, for sure, reach out to your member of Congress or the Senate and have your voice heard. We all get weekly reports of how many people contact us, in what way, on what issues, and it does have an impact. People just contacting their rep when they were home during the August break in district had a big impact on people doing the right thing. In fact, there was some talk about what we're going to do for the end of the fiscal year and how hard we fight. And I was surprised some of the most moderate to conservative members of our caucus came back the most willing to fight coming out of the August break because they talked to their constituents. So those conversations kind of mean everything. And town halls are really important too. Go to the town hall for your member. If you have a Republican member and they're not holding a town hall, go wherever they're going and make it a town hall, right? Don't let them get away with that. If they really were so proud of what they just passed, common sense would tell you they'd want to get on the rooftop and scream about it. Instead, they're hiding in their basements. So it doesn't pass the smell test. And I think when you get that across, even people who aren't really political and really following things closely kind of say something doesn't compute here. And it helps us, especially looking at next fall where we can change some things.
Definitely. And I think that there are so many people who don't quite realize, and I hate calling it this, but obviously this is its official name. The One Big Beautiful Bill is going to hurt so many people, and they might not even realize like the full effects that haven't quite taken effect yet, but the ways in which it's going to affect people's healthcare going forward, their subsidies, their Medicaid, all of these things. Is there a way that people can educate themselves about, or what do you think are the most important things that people need to know about the OBBB, and how can they push back against it at this point?
Yeah, I mean, get information from the resources that you trust. There are certainly, we know about the Medicaid cuts, and that's going to affect millions and millions of people. We know about the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act, which means people are going to pay more, or quite honestly, we're all going to pay more because more people will be uninsured going to hospitals. We know it's going to close more rural hospitals, which in places like Wisconsin, we have a lot of rural hospitals. You know that it's taking funding away from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which is the number one program keeping kids out of poverty. You're taking away food assistance, $6.20 a day, hardly anything. And they're doing that. They're taking away funding for higher education and K-12 education. And they're doing it all for these giant tax breaks for Elon Musk and Donald Trump. But two things that people don't always know that happened. There's a cut to Medicare that's triggered by the PAYGO rules. So that's going to cause about a $500 billion cut to Medicare. And also, because of so much money was spent on tax breaks for the wealthy, that we've lost a year of the Social Security Fund out of it. So as much as that's an issue and people are concerned, is there going to be a fund in the future for them? We've lost another year out of it because of those tax cuts for the wealthiest.
And so all of those things are going to affect seniors, they're going to affect children, they're going to affect everyone. I mean, it's really devastating. Well, I really appreciate getting a chance to talk to you and to hear about all the wonderful things that you are doing to fight back against, this increasingly authoritarian government. And thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of good members, and especially the Progressive Caucus I'm very active in, but I know we had 50 of us who went to a Republican district over that August period and did something to help create awareness about that big ugly law that the Republicans passed. And that's the kind of fight we need. We need to take it to them and make sure that we're holding them accountable. And I just think there's a lot of really great members doing that right now.
Definitely. We're lucky to have some of them in New York. So we have a lot of great members, yourself included, and so we appreciate you.
Sure, thank you.